1913, A Very Bad Year for America, produced by John Brooker of the School of the White Crane. Three critical events in 1913, followed by a corresponding event in 1936, together struck a resounding blow to America's freedom. In fact, they triggered the greatest turning point away from freedom in modern times. What were these dangerous events? And why do so few American citizens know about them, especially since they dramatically and negatively impact every detail of their lives? Most importantly, how can their effects be reversed and freedom restored? So they were the creation of the government-controlled central bank, known as the Federal Reserve, the temporary reinstatement of the federal income tax, which didn't prove to be temporary, and the direct election of United States senators by the people. These disastrous events were the result of the progressive movement which began in the late 1800s and ended after World War I. The Republican Party arose during the time of Abraham Lincoln and dominated America till the Great Depression. The progressive movement was successful in electing two presidents. The first was Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican, and the second is the darling of the left, Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat. Here is a picture of Woodrow Wilson signing into law the creation of the Federal Reserve. The questions that need to be asked are, can America exist without a government-controlled central bank? Is the financial system safer in the hands due to government control or by private financial institutions? Since periodic runs on the local banks had created financial panics in the 18th and the 19th centuries, it was obviously a lender of last resort was needed to supply capital at crucial times. Progressives believed that this function could and should be handled by the federal government, and that the nation's bank should be members of the Federal Reserve System. However, if we examine the purchasing power of the dollar over a century from 1913 to 2013, we see its value has been diminished by the monetary policies of federal government and its central bank. This is because politicians often find it more convenient to increase the money supply rather than raise taxes. Indeed, it lost nearly half of its value during Woodrow Wilson's administration. The easy money policies of the Federal Reserve prior to the Great Depression led to mild inflation. The collapse of private banks, particularly rural banks that had undiversified assets in small agricultural communities during the Great Depression, led to severe deflation of the dollar. For ordinary Americans, it meant that the fruit of their labor was taken through the monetary policies of their own government. The dollar and the English pound had retained their value for a century and a half under the hands of private financial institutions. Financial institutions that mismanage their money can fail and go out of business. The central bank, however, is supported by not only the full taxing power of the federal government, but also by the strength of its robust economy. Since President Nixon abandoned the gold exchange standard in 1971 up through 2003, the supply of money in the U.S. increased by 1,100%. The Fed's balance sheet, ballooning from $500 billion in 2000 to $4.4 trillion at the end of 2013, has been the result of money printing. Since government came to have this ready supply of cash, we see that the modern welfare state was born. The government's share of Americans' labor has been steadily increasing over the last century. Once it could be said of Americans that their interaction with their government was relegated to a trip to the post office or voting every 2 years. However, with enormous financial power of taxing and monetary policies, this has changed. Why is the 16th Amendment illegal? It directly allows the government to favor one group of Americans over another. Money taxed from one group is given in benefits to another more politically connected. It thus set the stage for corruption of the free enterprise model, where companies could gain funding or subsidies from the government. Large corporations do well as they cultivate government access. Large blocks of voters also do well as they carry elections for which they are given free stuff or benefits from the winning party. The 16th Amendment. President Woodrow Wilson promised Americans that only those earning more than $10,000, about $100,000 in today's dollars, per year would even pay taxes, and the tax rate would never exceed 3%. Now it's 36.9%. In the beginning that was so, but within 4 years families were taxed on all incomes above $1,000. And the top rate had risen to 76%, demonstrating how the elected class lies without compunction. Wilson promised the reinstatement of the income tax as a temporary measure. It would only affect a tiny portions of Americans wealthy. But as this chart shows, as America became more wealthy, the tax became more pervasive and took a larger bite out of the productive class of Americans, while at the same time created entitlement mentality for the takers. So, for example, the top tax bracket in 1913 was 7%. Now it's almost 40%. The total revenues in 1913 were $16.9 billion. Now it's $3.2 trillion. The standard deduction in today's dollars was almost $100,000 in 1913, and today it's only $12,600. And they've vastly increased the number of households that must comply. King George III, before the Revolution, proposed a tax on tea, a tax on paper, a tax on sugar, and a tax on certain imports. It would have been 1 to 2.5%. Today, in our constitutional republic, the income taxes, sales taxes, employment taxes, property taxes, inherited taxes, import taxes, export taxes, tax on gasoline, tax on cigarettes, tax on alcohol, other excise taxes, amounts to 30 or 40% of today's economy. This chart shows how the taxes of King George compare to current taxes imposed to support the modern welfare state. Mel Gibson's line in the movie Patriot comes to mind. Shall I fight one tyrant 3,000 miles away? Or shall I fight 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? So this shows the IRS in a kind of humorous form as Al Capone, Scarface. So people have come to fear the IRS, just as they feared Al Capone in Chicago. The IRS has admitted that it engaged in political profiling while processing applications for tax-exempt status. It searched tax applications for words like Tea Party and even Patriot. Once it found those groups, it made intrusive and unconstitutional inquiries, demanding answers upon penalty of perjury. Internal Revenue Service, Internal Revenge Service. Hence the humor of this political cartoon. The question in America today is, whose side are you on? If you are on the wrong side, then it's fair game to prosecute you, because those who are well connected do not want the funds to stop flowing. Internal Revenge Service. In 1791, the state legislators ran the United States Senate, but the 17th Amendment, passed in 1913, reversed the power of the states, removing their control over Washington and creating two separate and redundant houses of the people. From the progressive point of view, the popular election of United States senators was a move in the right direction, allowing for populist candidates. It bypassed the state legislators. We all know that the Constitution divides power between the legislative, the executive, and the judicial, with the legislative further being divided between a people's house, House of Representatives, originally elected by the popular vote of the people, and the Senate, originally elected indirectly through the state legislator. The problem, of course, is there's not just a horizontal separation of powers in the U.S. Constitution, but more importantly, a vertical separation of powers. The federal government was originally the least powerful of all. Then were states, counties, families, individuals who had inalienable rights. So the majority of the power lay at the bottom, the government of the people. So we're dividing it vertically. We have the federal government, states, and then the people and their families as individuals. I'd like to recommend, as for this virtual school, School of the White Crane, 1913, the book by Oliver DeMille. First, individual initiative in the long run is a firmer reliance than bureaucratic supervision. We do not need more knowledge, we need more character. We do not need more government, we need more culture. We do not need more law, we need more religion. We do not need more of the things that are seen. We need more of the things that are unseen. If the foundation be firm, the superstructure will stand. And the second, we have been successful beyond others in great commercial and industrial enterprises because we have been people of vision. Our prosperity resulted not by disregarding but by maintaining high ideals. Material resources do not and cannot stand alone. They are the product of spiritual resources. This is New York around the time of the 1920s. Finally, this is a picture of President Wilson's family. Americans in the late 19th century and the early 20th century saw enormous advances in material and social progress. There is no doubt many in the progressive movement truly believed they were doing good for America and the world. The problem with so many well-intentioned people is that they never examine the fruits of their actions. Regardless of their good intentions, there are verifiable results of their actions. First is that centralizing power in a government-sanctioned bank removed it from failing because of its mistakes. Whether its decisions are right or wrong is insulated by the full taxing power of the American federal government. Second, the income tax reversed the historic role of the government of servant of the people by making it master, first to be paid and withholding from every citizen's paycheck. Thirdly, the direct election of senators reduced a prudent body that could have resisted radical ideas to the engine of radical ideas. The government greatly weakened the power of the states to resist any encroachments by a federal leviathan. This video is a production of the schoolofthewhitecrane.com. You can reach us by schoolofthewhitecrane@gmail.com. John Brooker, and we also show this video on True Family Values TV. Thank you very much for your kind attention.